arrest.
Uncle Cameron was coming down the road, just being happy-go-lucky.
He was in the custody of Senior Sergeant Christopher Hurley.
Why did Cameron have a bruised jaw and a bruised forehead?
With his liver almost cleaved in two, an injury only able to be caused in a high-speed motor vehicle accident or an airplane crash.
Did you at any time strike him or punch him?
No, I did not.
She said to us, I'm sorry, there's no evidence.
And there will be no prosecution.
Chris Hurley's done nothing wrong.
Fine officer.
Acted quite properly.
He just tore everybody apart.
What chance do we have of any justice ever? Not only can a copper get away with murder, but the whole service come out proudly in support of...
The family of the woman who died while in police custody in 2014 has called for charges to be laid against the officers involved. Ms. Dew, a 22-year-old Yamachi woman, was arrested and detained for outstanding fines and ultimately died after days of crying for help.
The whitewashing of what happened to Miss Dew. This inquest has just played a role in excusing violence against an Aboriginal woman, violence resulting in her death, normalising it. I know there were some harsh words from the coroner. She said she didn't want to see this happen again. Well, this will happen again unless people are held responsible for treating Aboriginal people, Aboriginal women, in the most extremely abusive manner. Aboriginal women will be dying in custody if perpetrators are not held accountable. In this case, we had police and health officials who treated Ms. Dew in the most inhumane manner, who didn't care about her right to life, and they have all been excused, and that's unforgivable.
These blurry images documented the final hours of Ms. Dew, as the seriously injured woman was repeatedly taken to and fro between the South Headland Watch House to the Headland Health Camp. As the details of the case unfolded, the then Premier of Western Australia, Colin Barnett, was forced to accelerate the coronial inquest. It concluded in 2016. Ms. Dew was accused by the police of faking her illness and playing up her symptoms. At the inquiry, Officer Rick Bond testified that he called her an effing junkie. In fact, Ms. Dew was suffering an injury as a result of being thrown to the ground by her partner.
She can't feel her body. That's all what's done. She can't get up. She can't feel her legs.
Coroner Rosalinda Fogliani stated Ms. Dew had died from septicemia and pneumonia caused by a rib injury sustained prior to her arrest. The family of Ms. Dew has called for sackings and criminal charges to be brought against the police involved. Despite adverse findings against officers, the police late on Friday said no action would be taken against them.
Hey guys, welcome back to my channel here. It's Lavender here. Welcome back, comrades. If you like this video, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. So let's get started into this video topic. But before we start, I'm going to be linking videos related to why we should abolish the police, why we should abolish prisons, and the last video I'm going to be linking is the history of genocide in Black Aboriginal Australians and the colonial violent history of that. So let's get started into this video. So today I'm going to be doing true crime case, ongoing genocide of Black Aboriginal Indigenous Australians by the police in Australia and in police custody, deep dive story into this. So let's get started into this video. So I have talked about this problem in my previous videos. I did a video again on why we should abolish the police, why we should abolish prisons, YouTube video. I also talked about the history of Aboriginal Australians and how the genocide and all that. And I also have done multiple individual true crime cases involving these incidents on my channel. All the links will be in my description down below if you're interested in them, so yeah. So I wanted to do a deep dive into this topic story because deaths in custody in Australia keep happening, and I never see any YouTubers do videos about this really. I don't think I've seen any, honestly. So I decided to take action and do an activism video today about it because, like I said earlier, I want to do people of color true crime cases because there's systematic racism in the media since it's October and almost Halloween. So let's get started in this video. So yeah. Many people know more about police and prison violence in the United States, because the United States, again, just like Australia, is another settler colony by colonizers. Then the same violence that happens there in Australia, both are deserving of our attention and action. So what's behind the curious silence on deaths in custody in Australia? Nationally, 1 in 7 Aboriginals and Islanders in Australia have been to prison, and 1 in 3 live below the poverty line, and nearly all First Nations people who are incarcerated are from those living below the poverty line. Indigenous Australians are the most incarcerated people in the world. Statistically, a teenage Aboriginal boy is more likely to go to jail than go to university. A detective visited the parents of a young Aboriginal man. A warrant had been issued for their son's arrest. "We're going to get your son. He's going to be locked up and put in jail," the detective police officer told them. "But if you get him to come around right now, I can guarantee that the rest will be a non-eventful process. He won't be harmed. We'll put him into custody. He'll serve his time, and then he can get on with his life outside of jail." He was later quoted saying, "However, this was a complete straight-up lie, because as soon as they got him, they grabbed him, roughed him up, and smashed his face into the fence, causing a head injury." The Professor Peter O'Mara, a Windgerman and chair of RACGP Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Health, told the press that that young man went into the system. Approximately 1 week later, he was dead in police custody. It has been over 30 years since the inquiry into Aboriginal deaths in custody in Australia by the Royal Commission. They had made hundreds of recommendations to address the crisis, but yet nothing has been really done about it at all, and there has been a very severe lack of action has been taken. Since 1991, at least 474 Aboriginal Black people have died in custody in Australia. Not only that, but most of the police officers involved in the incidents get off scot-free and are acquitted of their crimes and take no responsibility. Racist attitudes because of systematic racism and colonization and imperialism and all that, and assumptions drive this neglect and inaction, the constant cycle of violence being perpetuated. In Australia, for example, Aboriginal and Native Indigenous people only make up 3% of the entire Australia population. However, they make up a staggering 27% to 28% of the prison population in Australia as a whole. This is because they were genocided and severely oppressed during colonization and British imperialism, and how that correlates to, why they're in prison. One study into Aboriginal Indigenous Australia prepared for the National Inquiry into Racist Violence concerning Indigenous peoples, aka juveniles in particular, and their relations with police. It found that over 80% of Aboriginal juveniles in detention centers in New South Wales, Queensland, and Western Australia alleged that they had been assaulted by police at least on one occasion. Aboriginal girls who were interviewed reported similar assaults to males, as well as the incidents of sexist verbal abuse. Overall, the research found that there was widespread complaints and human rights violations in relation to violence across the 3 states. The allegations were geographically widespread within each state, and found that there was an internal consistency in the types of complaints which were made across the nation of Australia. In addition, there was a strong tendency on the part of those interviewed to see the violence as something normal and to be expected. The violence was not seen as unusual, and in some cases the significance of the violence was downplayed by the victims. Violence by the police officers was found to take a number of forms, including verbal abuse, physical assault, provocation, and harassment. More recently, the Australian Bureau of Statistics, 1995 through 2004, National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander surveys have provided disturbing data on the conflict between Indigenous people and the criminal justice system. The 1994 survey found that approximately 10% of all persons under the age 13 years and over reported being harassed and hassled by police during the 12 months prior to being interviewed. Some 14% of males and 5% of females said they were hassled by the police. The same survey estimated that 22% of males aged between 15 and 19 years old reported being hassled. Approximately 3% of persons aged 13 and over said that they had been physically assaulted by police in the 12 months before the interview. Deaths in custodies have been a major issue for Indigenous people and were the subject of extensive Royal Commission in the later part of the 1980s and early 1990s. The Royal Commission into Aboriginal deaths in custody was established because there had been a number of deaths in police and prison custody which caused serious alarm among Aboriginal communities across the country. These included in particular the deaths of John Pat in Western Australia. He was kicked to death by police after a pub brawl. And Eddie Murray in New South Wales, he was picked up by the police for public drunkenness and died from hanging in a police cell. A victim of this, I don't know how to say his name, Malguri, cried out for help from the cell, his prison cell, after being fatally injured, and no one came to help. The images from the cell videotape of this guy writhing down in pain on the floor as he lay dying on the cell floor were shockingly and terribly distressing to the family and anyone who sat through that portion of the evidence. The sounds from the cell surveillance tape are unlikely to be forgotten by anyone who's in the courtroom and heard the tape played. There's clear evidence that this must have been able to be heard from the police station day room where the monitor was running. If you don't know this guy, he was like beaten by a police officer, I think kicked in like the liver, and it like fatally cut his liver or something. The government says most of the 339 recommendations by the Royal Commission have been fully enacted, but this is strongly rebuffed by the Human Rights Act. The inquiry recommended incarceration should be only used as a last resort. Mandatory detention for minor offenses should be abolished altogether, along with raising the minimum age of imprisonment. It said states should set up a sobering up shelters to bring people to instead of prison cells. So why are deaths in custody in Australia so silent about this ongoing issue? Recently there appears to be a new push in non-publication or suppression orders being sought out by the state parties in coroner courts in Australia. In one of the true crime cases, for instance, the media was ordered not to publish the names, addresses, or any other identifying features, including photographs of 21 New South Wales corrections staff members. Outside of the coroner's courts, there is a threat of subjective contempt when the media coverage may pose a prejudicial threat to potential trial. This carries a risk for families who speak out about their loved ones' deaths in a way that even implicates something happened or someone did something. Subject contempt poses liability to them personally when they speak out, but also could jeopardize their push for justice. This is a problematic given the timely publication about deaths in custody is what drives attention. I want to take mention of the notable victims in this case of this genocide. Cameron Domangi, a 2004 death in custody on Great Palm Island, Queensland. He was a 36-year-old man and was murdered in a police cell by a police officer on November 19, 2004. He was locked up for being drunk and publicly intoxicated and a public nuisance. Hours later, he was dead from massive internal injuries, including broken ribs, a ruptured spleen, and his liver was so badly damaged it was almost severed and almost severed across near his spine. Residents accused the police officer Senior Sergeant Hurley of murder, but he was acquitted of all charges and of manslaughter in 2007 by an all-white jury. There's another victim, Miss Dayu, an Aboriginal woman who died in 2014 in South Headland, Western Australia. Miss Dayu was subjected to inhumane treatment by Western Australian police and medical staff due to systematic racism. She had a broken rib infection going on caused by her abusive boyfriend earlier. The police thought she was faking her injury because she was a so-called druggie, and systematic racism played a huge role in her death. And not only that, but systematic racism in the healthcare industry as a whole. The emergency department doctor Annie Lang told the inquest she thought Dayu's pain was real. However, she thought it was extremely exaggerated, but Rona notes that it could be for her behavioral gain, suggesting that her pain that she was having was all fake. The footage shows the police officer Bourges yank her sharply into a sitting position and then drop her arm, causing her to fall back and her head on the concrete. The police officer lied and said that she had slipped. Later, she died from the infection altogether. And there's another victim, John Pat, a 16-year-old boy killed in Western Australia in 1983. Numerous witnesses said they saw off-duty police officers pick a fight with John Pat and his friends at a local pub on September 28, 1983. He was arrested and taken into police lockup where he died of massive head injury later that night. 4 officers and a police aide were later charged with his manslaughter, but were all acquitted at trial. There's another victim, Kingsley Richard Dixon, a 19-year-old who died in Abdel Gelwel in 1987, one of the 2 cases which sparked the Royal Commission thing to begin with. Another victim, Rebecca Meyer, was an Indigenous woman found in Midland, New South Wales police cell in July 16th. She died after being arrested for public intoxication. The coroner found that she would have survived if police had followed, basic procedures. Another victim, David Denge, who died aged 26 in Long Bay Hospital at Long Bay Correctional Centre in Sydney, Australia in 2015. Denge had diabetes and died after being held down by 5 police officer guards who asked him to stop eating biscuits. While being injected with a sedative by prisoners, he said the words just like George Floyd, I can't breathe, and he later died. And one final victim that I want to talk about is Tiana Day, who fell into a coma in a police cell in Melbourne, Australia, and later died in a hospital in December 2017. In April 2020, a coroner referred the case to prosecutors for further investigation, stating that her death was very preventable. And on August 27th, 2020, Victoria Police announced that they would not be laying any charges against any of the police officers after receiving advice from the Office of Public Prosecutions. If you guys like this video, please share this video. It's really important that we share this video online and to have a big reach. So yeah.